And good evening and welcome to Out of the Bag. This is Sean Maguire live on Healing Oracle Radio and People's Internet Radio. And it is the 2nd of December, 2nd of the 12th, 2020 already. Time is rushing by. And I Have a Dream, I have to mention it again, by Muggsy the Juck is my theme tune. I Have a Dream by Muggsy the Juck. And God, his words are more relevant now than it was when he wrote it. We are definitely rats in a feckin' maze, aren't we? Eh? Being experimented on. Anyway, I won't get into all that. I've got a packed show for you tonight. In the first 2 hours of the show, I will play a pre-recorded interview with Ken Scott. If you've been following him, this is the 11th, yes, the 11th show he has been on. That's 2 hours times 11 of information, and he will be on next month as well in the new year with more information. Tonight is as good as it always is. Ken's information is second to none. Do check out www.panterrapca.org and www.gemstoneuniversity.org. In the final hour, so that's for 2 hours, the first 2 hours. In the final hour, I'll be bringing you music from bands who have been announced to play Rebellion Festival 2021. I've got so many fantastic bands to play for you tonight. Fire Exit, Cholera, Moscow Death Parade, Los Fastidios, Acides, Chaotic Discord, loads more. And I hope you stick around for the final hour of the show. Now, before I play you my pre-recorded interview that I've done with Ken Scott on Friday, I will just want to make an announcement here, and it's too much of a long of an announcement. I was hoping to read it all out, what they posted on their Facebook page, but it's too long, so I want you to go ahead and read it yourselves. The details of what's going on from the start to the present day in the Strokes Down Falsk situation. The fact that Anthony McGann from the McGann family, Kevin Taylor and Colin Granahan, both have been on Out of the Bag a few times in the past, are all languishing in Mountjoy jail tonight and have been for the last 3 days. The details of that story, if you like, the updated, bringing you the truth about the judicial system in this country, how corrupt it is, naming names, individuals, showing you the scam that has been perpetrated by the banks, one use of a comma or a full stop, and suddenly it's a different company attacking you. It's just amazing stuff. So please go onto their Facebook page. So that's facebook.com, and the Anti-Eviction Task Force page has posted it up. It's on the Anti-Eviction Task Force, and also maybe check out Joe Ducey's page as well. Now, without further ado, I'm going to get on and play you. Otherwise, I won't be able to play as much punk music in the final hour. If I don't, I will now play you the interview that I did with Ken Scott on Friday, and I have to say there's a bit of a technical difficulty around the 1.5 hour mark, but we overcame it, and my apologies in advance. Here's my interview with Ken Scott. And welcome to Out of the Bag. This is Sean Maguire live on Healing Oracle Radio and People's Internet Radio. And it is the 27th of the 11th, 2020. Time is really shooting on, so it is. And I am now doing another pre-recorded interview for my show on December the 2nd, on Wednesday, December the 2nd. And I have the wonderful Ken Scott back with me, the co-founder of Panterra Private Contract Association, as well as the initiator of the Gemstone University and Media Alliance concept. This is now the 11th in a series of interviews that will hopefully give people enough knowledge and information to free themselves from the bonds that tie us to the psychopathic matrix of debt and slavery. Check out www.panterrapca.org and of course www.gemstoneuniversity.org. Ken Scott, welcome back to Out of the Bag.
Thank you, Sean. I'm happy to be here. It's a very lovely day here in Southern California. The sun is shining, the sky is blue, and there's no white fuzzy in the sky today, so the grass is happy and everybody's happy.
Well, that's brilliant. And you just celebrated Thanksgiving, obviously, over there. And here it's just gone 6 o'clock in the evening. It's only 10 in the morning where you are.
Yep, 10:10 actually, to be precise. 10:10 on 11/11 or 11/17 or however those numbers work. And here we are.
Exactly. So, let's use the magic of numerology and timing and go for it. Yeah. How have you been since last month, first of all, I suppose, and how are things going with you?
Well, generally speaking, I am always consistently good. Life is not without its challenges, and there is a lot of stress and pressure on us in what we're doing. But deep down, the truth of the matter is I have a lot of experience of joy bubbling up from within.
Brilliant.
Now it's a pretty constant, because what I envisioned to do in my life going back 40 to 50 years ago has matured. It has opened up, and as well as mature in terms of manifesting. We've got a great group of people in Panterra as members of the private society. We're going through lots of shifts and changes we might touch upon later in the call, but generally we have a core of about 300 to 400 people who are really focused, and year by year we've developed a very strong unified field, unified in intent and purpose, and more in terms of synergy of function. We have actually a lot of new people showing up with great skills and professional backgrounds that are really committed to what we're doing. So more and more, I just experience a lot of joy and actually gratitude, given Thanksgiving yesterday. To me, it's a daily event, yes. Gratitude. And so I'm feeling great.
Brilliant. Well, that's great to hear. I mean, the first question I'm going to ask you, actually, from a listener is really asks, about that situation and people joining and people being part of Panterra and Gemstone and all the rest of it. In Ireland, most gatherings and groups and organisations that try and set up to try and beat, the corrupt governments, etc., get wrecked by agents provocateurs, by infiltrators or similar. Have you ever had that trouble? Have you ever had somebody or some body of bodies coming into Panterra and trying to, I suppose, wreck it from within?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting and appropriate question. Almost entirely within the context of what that being is talking about. I don't know, male or female, he or she, but yeah. And asking about almost entirely, the answer is no. And I'll explain the what and the why in a moment. But let's define terms. Agent, as you pronounce it, agent provocateurs, people who come in as stealth agents and provocate to disrupt. They act as if they're all for everything, but they're sent in to disrupt and undermine and so forth. We haven't had that in terms of a specifically identified individual or individuals doing that. But what we have had, and I'll refer back to the movie The Matrix. Remember The Matrix? Neo comes to learn that anybody within the Matrix is potentially an Agent Smith.
Right.
And what's an Agent Smith? Somebody who is essentially operating from the programmed AI operating system to basically thwart or attack anybody who's trying to wake up or has somewhat woken up and is trying to do something different, to basically break the death hold of the Matrix off of oneself and others. And so right after that movie came out, Andrea and I, my wife, as we always do, we intensely discuss and evaluate things. Well, that certainly stimulated us a lot, and that in particular, because already that was in 1999. I'm pretty sure that's when it came out. And she and I had been together for 7 years, and within less than 3 months, we had what started to be then and has virtually, well, I won't say up to now, but had virtually never stopped up until several years ago, of people showing up, not necessarily agents provocateurs on a conscious level, but basically coming in saying, we're all for the vision, we're here to help, all that. And basically then falling into program behavior. And as we've talked about, the primary program of all humanity on this planet is the binary mind, the polarity that's within us, that is used over and over for thousands of years, called divide and conquer, the Machiavellian principle, which we're watching have its absolute last hurrah in America right now. And so they ended up being significantly undermining and what have you. But we always looked at it, out of those experiences, I coined the phrase, there are no enemies, only opportunities. And whether it was somebody who seemed to be a friend or some outside party or an official authority in the IRS or the police or whoever, we grew into always saying, this is an opportunity. They're not our enemy, and took responsibility for it. And so we looked at, well, what's off within us that pulled this in as a manifestation, and we had to deal with it. And then in dealing with it, we grew, we resolved things, we moved through it, and that's always been a constant in the last 29 years since we've been together and working together. And so in the one sense, they became agents of the matrix. And how did that occur? Well, it occurs by the programming habituated internal belief systems or emotional issues or any form of the things that we're all subject to from our past lives, current life, behavioral programming, family, social, school, political, media, all the rest of that. And those are all the things that we're all programmed with to keep us separate, polarized.
So these people, Ken, had good intentions and did have the same, I suppose, worldview, but they just, I suppose, were chaotic in their lifestyle and therefore brought chaos with them. Yeah,
and so that's the seen part of it. Seen meaning the physical reality, human beings interacting and so forth. But it's very important to understand, which I think most of you listeners do, that we're dealing with unseen forces. And where do these unseen forces come into a individual and in effect take control, or at least partial control, and convert that being into the living man or woman into an agent of the matrix? Well, the landing point is where we have suppressed energy in the form of trauma that could be karmically cycled from past lives, but then we recreate, and I have a phrase or 3 words: trauma, karma, drama, where we have trauma that has been embedded in our field, in our being, regardless of what body we're incarnated in. When we reincarnate, by the nature of creation, we will recreate that. So that trauma becomes karma that continually recycles in patterns. And then we recreate events that re-establish the trauma, physically, emotionally, and otherwise. And then we're just constantly out picturing it in the form of drama. Drama through relationships, through money issues, through legal issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But for us also, there's a continuum. What was showing up 28, 29 years ago, and for the next 20 years in terms of intense drama in a lot of ways, that we then took as an opportunity to face our own inner karmic and traumatic imprinting and suppressed energies. And we worked with it, we process it, and we do that now still every day. We've been doing it. I've been doing it one way or the other for 50 years. And Andrea, 40 plus years. Together, 28 and almost 29 years. And at a certain point, when you've done enough of that, it opens up your inner landscape, and more of who we really are in terms of your being, your multidimensional capacity and awareness and so forth, has more and more of an opportunity to come through this extraordinary technology that's the human body, and less of those things that can attach to you can even stick or show up even. So in the last few years has gotten more and more into the continuity of being in synchronicity and alignment with creation and directing our creational field, what we're building in Panterra, and much less and less of the drama and all the rest of that. And we are taking steps in the course of this year to create a filtering mechanism, because up until, and I've talked about this in our calls before, that for the first 6-7 years since we really started establishing what we are today with the Gemstone University site and everything and all the education and so forth. Well, up until the beginning of this year, anybody could walk through the door. We had it, available. People could just go on the site, become a member, walk in, and there they were. Well, we had a lot of people who got really intense, really problematic. A lot of it had to do in the law arena, where people were just absolutely unwilling. They were educated a lot. They knew a lot about law and related subjects, but they were at war with the system and the matrix, and they just didn't want to let that go. So they came in and they just wanted to essentially take over and say, no, we got to go to war. And we said, no, that's not what we're doing. Either you shift within yourself or you leave. Most of them left, and there's a lot of variations in other areas that we don't need to go into detail, but we learned a lot. And that, what I just opened up saying, how am I? And I'm feeling more and more present, more joy, because we are in a fluid continuity of creation now, manifesting what we're here to do, that the people who are now here, and we stopped having an open door policy, so we go through a vetting and review process to see where somebody's really at. And now we're having more and more quality people show up who are really here to be committed to our mission of what we're here to do.
That's brilliant, and it's great to hear, because you don't really want chaos merchants coming in and spoiling it. So I suppose the little learning process of having those with you and sharing those dramas has made you aware, and therefore you can vet people much, much easier. And the people that are in a chaotic state can be directed to where they need to be to maybe get out of that state and then maybe come back in the future.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. But the other half of the answer to the question is exactly points to why we are a private society. And so the combination of my learning and understanding and then integrating what a society is and what being in the private is and what contractual relationships are, because we're both a private society and a private contract association. And so in the United States and most Western countries to level and degree, but here it's hardwired in the federal and all the states' constitutions that the states cannot impinge or impair the obligations, which is the binding agreements and the meeting of the minds and the exchange of consideration of contracts. And so creating it as a private contract relationship and an association based on private contract, that fundamentally, if somebody is not a party to a contract, they have no jurisdiction, they have no authority, they cannot come into the private arena of that contract, because contract, as I've said before, makes law. All law is fundamentally contract. And so the private society aspect, the private contract, going to peace, where we are not at war, where, as I've explained before, we've had plenty of people show up from the IRS to the local sovereign citizen task force and so forth, looking to see if we, essentially, are we here as a threat to the public? Are we promoting or participating or creating domestic terrorism? Which most people in the law are doing one way or the other, the law movement.
Yes.
And you set yourself up. When you do that, you're an enemy of the state. If you look at the PanterraPCA.org website, which is our public notice site, under public notices, the heading, you'll see all the letters that I sent to all the major world administrative offices and bodies, from the Holy See to the Lord Mayor of the City of London and so forth. and said, we're at peace. If you have any rebuttal or ability to say we can't do what we're doing, or we don't have the right and authority to be a private society where your jurisdiction doesn't apply, and many things that have followed with that, including a very formal presentment of an offer of treaty of peace and cessation of hostilities with the Holy See. All these things were done like 6-7 years ago, and we have never had a problem since. So they leave us alone because we are standing as peace, we are pursuing peaceful remedies, and we know the law. So nothing we do is harming the public. Yeah. And that's a phrase that, I use that phrase. Somebody taught me that phrase like 25 years ago in the mid-90s. No harm to the public. Except the people who taught me that phrase were actually inadvertently, unknowing to themselves, harming the public. Okay. And you have to understand what the public is, what harm is. It all gets down to the monetary system. And when you create something with paper that you put into the public, whether you send it to the Treasury or the IRS, that creates debt or in any ways creates a controversy that then gives them jurisdiction judicially and so forth, all of it creates harm to the public. So this is one of the most important things to understand. And so how do you proceed in both protecting yourself, clearing things so that they're not attached to you, while staying at peace, being at peace with the United States and the world, and not causing harm? Well, that's where the deeper education comes in.
Right. Now, I think at this point, now I know we've covered a little bit of it before, but it'd be really, really good to reiterate succinctly what a private society is and a private association is, the difference between the two, and how they also marry together.
Well, fundamentally, private or public has to do with, again, contract. Have you set something up that knowingly or inadvertently has established a contract with a public institution or entity or what have you? And there's many societies that are in the public. The American Cancer Society, the Society for Jesus, the Jesuits, well, they're in a sort of different category, but American Cancer Society, or the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, et cetera, et cetera. They all formed as corporations. They then got a exemption as a 501c3, which is a tax-exempt privilege if you follow the rules under the IRS code and things like that. And so they're societies. A society fundamentally was first defined in international law in the book, or the series, the volumes called Law of Nations. And the very first article and sentence in there says that a nation is a society of like-minded men who come together for a common purpose. Of course, men was excluded women at that time, 240 years ago, or 50 years ago when it was published, but essentially establishes people coming together with like mind and purpose for a common purpose. That is a society. Now, then it defined a nation as being that, but fundamentally, the society comes first. And that goes back to the history of City of London about 600 to 700 years ago, and how the original bodies were created that became essentially the ruling body of the City of London as a sovereign independent city-state, primarily for law and banking purposes in the triple crown of the global system as we know it today. And those societies were fraternities and guilds and what's called liveries, and basically associations of men for a common purpose. And you wouldn't think those private societies had much force and effect when you hear the names, because the names are like the fishmongers society or guild or whatever, and the yarn weavers guild or something like that. Okay. But they are the most powerful entities on the planet because they control the City of London, which controls all the law on the planet within the public system, and as well as the monetary and the banking through all the banks in the City of London. So they started as societies, and then as nation, the concept of a nation was established in the 1700s. Fundamentally, a society is established, and then a nation is formed. But that was the building block to lead to the ultimate endpoint that we're in right now, which was to create a transnational global entity and structure called the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund and all these international conventions and treaties and superseding agreements that the culmination of which was intended to be the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Pact. That, I don't know if are you familiar with that?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was ready to be fully implemented if Hillary had won the election 4 years ago. And that would have pretty much been the end of national sovereignty. And so nation really is a misdirect. Yes, it's fine for us to establish identity as a national within our, where we dwell and inhabit, were born or naturalized. But it was also essentially a bait and switch. So in looking at that, I came to understand that a society was fundamentally the true building block. And if that was created, structured, and operated and maintained privately, meaning it did not go into the public system to contract with, a state body of statutes, legal codes, through a corporate entity or various things like that, then it started life as and remained as a private society.
Okay, and association is just by association, is it? It's just a word used that connects people together?
Yeah, again, there's public legal statutory definitions of association. If you look in the United States codes and all the states, they use the word person. A lot of people, most people, virtually all people who have studied law, even to a small degree, know that the word person is another bait and switch, because in the codes it's defined as an individual, an association, a trust, a corporation, and a couple other things. And so an association is what in the legal system would be called a juristic person. It has legal identity, but it is not a living being.
So it's just a corporate entity, is it?
Essentially, it converts it to a corporate entity. And so if you create in the public under their statutes and codes, you can create an unincorporated association as, a group of people who come together for a quilting bee or a Saturday morning prayer group or whatever it is, and you create an association. Well, if you're going to gather some money from selling your quilts or however you get money in, and you need a bank account, you can go to the bank and identify yourself statutorily as an unincorporated association, but then by doing so, you then essentially step out of the private and become effectively a corporate identity or a juristic person.
Yeah, is that because of it's a form of registration, so regis to the kings who are handing away their sovereignty?
Yeah. So in order to get through the last 20 years, my expertise has gone deeply into trust, into estate law, how that works, which all those two relate to what is equity, and jurisdiction, of course, all the different kinds of jurisdiction, kingdom law, canon law, ecclesiastical law, commercial law, common law, all these things. And to that I, through the 3 decades of my work in all of this, what I was able to do, and all of us, the people I hung out with, and we collaborated and studied and created things together going back 30 years ago. What was needed and what we could do, for example, in getting bank accounts or doing other things that you needed to do that were public structures. And 30 years ago, we could create a trust, knew how to do it privately, could get a bank account without a identification number, without social security numbers, all that kind of stuff. And so, without going into the detail, which is quite vast,
yes,
I've spent 30 years having to walk through the labyrinth of all the changes because they continually change the IRS code, the banking requirements, post 911, the Patriot Act, what became known as KYC AML, transparency and mandatory requirements in the banking arena. KYC is know your client or your customer, meaning you had to identify yourself to the bank to get a bank account. And that always inevitably led to public ID, social security numbers, entity ID numbers, and things like that. AML is anti-money laundering. So the control of the money system through AML and KYC and the banking and the things that were required to be done if you wanted to operate through those functions became tighter and tighter and tighter. But because I've had 30 years experience going from where we were at when I first started in the early 90s and seeing the changes and so forth, out of that evolved my understanding of how to basically be in the matrix and not of it, without attaching your private standing to the public. And the summary phrase is multi-layered, multi-jurisdictional structure. How to layer things multi-layered, where you have different entities in different jurisdictions. And in the banking world, it gets down to one fundamental, in the banking world that requires compliance to KYC AML, it gets down to one thing, what's called a ultimate beneficial owner, because every entity must have a beneficiary or beneficial owner. And there's, you can have a chain of trusts and LLCs and international entities, but sooner or later you get down to the bedrock. Who is the ultimate beneficial owner of this? And that's where they attach you back to the system. So there's no one silver bullet. There's no one do this, just, pay me all this money and I'll give you this piece of paper that says you're this, and then you're free, you're private, and you can go do everything you want. It doesn't work that way. It will progressively be able to be more and more working that way with what we talked about last time, the Kingdom of David, and what we're doing to perfect that jurisdiction, and why the public system is hardwired by law to fully recognize it. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay, well, I think it's really important for people to know that they don't have to go through 30 years of living it and researching it. You've done that. It's brought bang up to date, and really we're in a situation where if somebody will step in there now, there's really a list of what they've got to do, isn't there?
Yeah. And this is why what's going on right now here in the so-called United States and the American process, the election, the post-election, what's going on.
What is going on? From here in Ireland, all the news outlets, Biden's absolutely won it. And then there's the media on internet, etc., and radio, and they're coming out with, actually, Biden hasn't won it. It's all a fix and blah, blah, blah. So.
Well, actually, we were talking last night. We had about 7 people, not about. Let me see. We had
don't be admitting having more than 6 people, or you might get arrested, Ken.
Oh well, we were definitely in the 4 corners of the living room, and the other 3 had to be in the other bedrooms. We never got close.
No.
And not closer.
Couldn't even hug goodbye. That's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah. but we passed the cat around, because I don't think the cat is required for that. So we kissed the cat, passed it on. So
that cat flu has to get out there somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't want to. We have some questions, other subjects. That's part 2. We'll talk about a little bit more about where Panterra and KOD is, and we'll talk about the election and what's going on. But I will say what I was starting to say is that last night we were, of course, talking about all that stuff, and our very close friend and associate who lives with Andrea and I, and she works with us around the clock, and she has been a tremendous help in building Panterra over the last 3 years. Anyway, she's British, and she's a U.S. citizen. She came here around, I think, 18 or 20 years ago and went through that whole process. So she was saying that she was communicating with her sister who lives somewhere in or near London in the last couple of weeks, and the sister was saying, until you started sending me these things, as far as I was concerned, and every single person I interact with, the entirety of England, we totally believe that Biden won and Trump is just a sore loser, and he's just moping around and doing scorch earth and blowing things up. So
he's having a tantrum, is what we're told. Isn't it? Yeah,
tantrum, exactly. Yeah. So obviously, all of your media is just pumping that, right, over and over, constant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the regular media here, same thing. There's 2 phrases that the media uses over here constantly. One is baseless claims.
Yes.
Baseless, not one substantive basis of fact that there was fraud. It's just totally baseless from a pouting sore loser. And the other one is raging pandemic. They're
dropping dead in the streets, Ken. They're dropping dead in the streets.
Well, they are, yeah. Flies. Oh no, those are flies.
Yeah.
But those 2 phrases, every day you hear them if you listen to anything in that media arena, and but the basic agenda is, very succinctly, if they could actually get Biden into the office, and you've got Klaus Schwab, you know who he is?
From the WEF, yes.
Yeah, World Economic Forum, and all of his cronies, which is a completely unelected body,
I don't understand why we're putting policies into place all over the world without any referendum or any choice from the public. It's amazing.
Well, because they're out in the open, and the only thing that they can really use and rely on is mind control.
Yes.
Mass mind control.
Yeah.
But anyways, this so-called Great Reset that they're talking about, which is essentially writing, their public statement is, it just happened that COVID-19 happened, and we've already gone all this distance with new rules, quarantine, and vaccines and so forth. We might as well continue on, since it sort of kind of fits into what we have been saying for years. Well, yes. That's bullshit. They've been planning and strategizing this for years, and so if Biden got in office, it would then go into this global reset, which obviously they're implementing in many countries, including UK, and they would just go to their full program. So what Trump is doing and standing resolute and will not budge, because one, he knows things that the public is not being informed about. We can get into that later, but the bottom line is, he really is standing between them and us, and he has the power in the position, and everything that's happening is for one purpose: to totally expose how corrupt the agenda is. And so the election was allowed to be hijacked. It was a sting operation. It was, let them come into the narrow arroyo and have all your archers on top of the plateau and, have them come into the ambush.
Yeah, I don't know how well planned it was, Ken, but apparently many of the states in America had, all of the legal, if you like, voting slips were all watermarked, etc. So that's one of the stings I heard of. I don't know whether it's true or not. Maybe you can tell me. That is that thousands upon thousands, in fact hundreds of thousands of votes for Biden had no watermark.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, my personal educated opinion is that Trump got at least 100 million votes, probably 110 to 120. Biden probably got 30 to 40 million. So right now they're saying Biden has 80 million plus and Trump has whatever, 74, 75.
But they're also saying that Biden is the most voted for president in history. And I mean, he's so well loved. We all knew about Biden. We know his backstory. Like fuck we do. We didn't know anything about the guy in Ireland. We had no idea who Biden was, apart from he was biding his time in the background wanting to be president.
Yeah. I mean, it's so absurd.
Yeah.
And...
surely that should highlight everything to people, that it's so forced and so that it's a complete scam,
Yeah. And they know it. I mean, the deep state, the Democrats and so forth, they know it's just so blatantly. And so either they're so pathologically lost in their own lie that they actually believe it, which I think is true for a lot of them. But at the very top, they know that it's not going to fly. I mean, the fact is that, can I confirm that watermark? No, I know the same thing you do, what you've heard and seen out there. Is that likely to be true? Yeah, probably. Good probability is. But more importantly is the electronic side of it between Dominion and Smartmatic, which, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it. Smartmatic is one of the major voting machine companies, and it was built and created in Venezuela by the direction of Hugo Chavez to win all of his elections. And the level of infiltration of having foreign nationals be literally directing how the electronic voting is happening, and then where all of the Dominion voting was directed overseas and so forth.
It is pretty crazy, and Dominion is still linked to Bill Gates and software houses owned by him, etc. So there's another connection there.
Yeah, and the Clinton Foundation and so forth.
Yes.
But I don't want to spend too much of our time going into all that. The sum total of my perspective, my very well informed and very educated perspective, and I wouldn't call it an opinion because it rises above just opinion.
Right. Okay.
Is that what we're watching is a pre-scripted movie that was on Trump and all of his allies' side. This was known well before even 4 years ago. Once 4 years ago started, once he took office, they've known exactly where this was going to go. They've known that they would rake it through Congress with the Democratic-controlled House. They knew the cheating with the voting. I personally believe that they allowed the Democrats to take control of the House so that they would do everything they've done in the last 2 years to totally expose themselves. And, between the absurd impeachment, one of the silliest things is they spent they're still doing it today, 4 years of this Russia collusion that Trump stole the election in 2014. But the minute all this happens, they're saying, oh, there's no fraud in the elections. Everything is kosher, everything is. But this was known back then. It's been a perfectly orchestrated plan. put the Democrats in the House.
Along with the voting and with the COVID, it's the same plan by the same people. And
Yeah.
you know, we were told, if you listen and if you look at some of the interviews, even like Fauci was interviewed and various other people way back 3 or 4 years ago, saying about a pandemic will be coming during Trump's administration. I mean, how that is satanic, you know, telling it, you know, revealing it to us before they do it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'll refer the listeners to one of our members. His name is Dr. Andy Kaufman, not related to the comedian. He's a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, but he's gone in his career more and more into, you know, whole system healing. There's a growing movement. I don't know if you're aware of it, in primarily here in the U.S., I think, but I'm quite sure it's in Europe and worldwide. Essentially, the difference between the germ theory and the terrain theory, and it's sort of like what comes first, the chicken and the egg. Did a germ or a virus or bacteria show up from an external source to infect a body that then overran the body and potentially could kill the body, or certainly make it quite sick, and hence it's an external thing that came in and did that? Or is it a matter of the terrain, which is the inner landscape of the biology, the immune system, the gut system, and so forth, the blood system, that progressively gets more and more out of balance, out of alignment with the whole system of the body, and as a result actually starts creating something from within to try and balance the body back out. And that balancing is done by microorganisms. You know, you have good microorganisms in the gut called the microbiome, and should have a balance between the ones that can harm you, and everything stays in check and balance. So Andy's work has progressed. So if you go on YouTube, you look under Andy Kaufman, you'll see his work, and it'll lead to other people.
Yeah, I've looked at quite a lot of his work, and Markowitz and various other, Dolores Cahill over here. I had a guest on only a few weeks ago called Neil Sanders, and he states that Dr. Andy Kaufman is wrong and is a charlatan and has got it all wrong, and a few other doctors as well. So that's what my listeners would have heard of Andy Kaufman only a few weeks ago. Do you know? That's what I heard.
Yeah. Well, there's more and more people. You know, this has happened over and over. Many people in many categories, whether it's medicine and biology, law and money, or so forth, where a few individuals, through persistent research and investigation, come up with what seems to be a disruptive or innovative concept, but actually ultimately perseveres and becomes a accepted norm.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's two figures in the 19th century, Pasteur and Beauchamp, who had basically the two contrary positions.
Yes.
Pasteur, of course, the germs; Beauchamp in France, the terrain. But at the end of his life, Pasteur said, "No, I was wrong.
Yeah.
He was right."
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop them from saying, you know, building the entire global medical mafia based on the germ theory, that we have to attack it and attack the systems with drugs, or
if it's going to make them money, let's cut, burn, or drug. You know, that's
right. Exactly. So, but it's not per se Andy's theory. He was not a biomedical doctor or this or that, you know, in terms of all the details. He's just a researcher. He came from the mental health arena, and he was a psychiatrist. But in his investigation, he found a lot of people with very significant research and expertise in these areas, and he's pulling it together.
Yeah.
So, but how I see his work is he speaks of the body, the cellular system, producing what is called an exosome. A some, S-O-M-E, is basically means a body. Exo means outside of. So the cells create something outside of themselves to basically clean the system. A virus is a solvent-like non-living organism. It doesn't have a complete set of what you would call a life form. So it has to attach to the DNA and otherwise in the cell to do what it does, but its purpose is as a biological solvent to clean up inflammation, congestion, and other things that put us out of balance. But the more our microbiome and our blood system and immunity and all the rest of it is out of balance, the more and more accumulation of that is building up in the body. Now we have external things creating that, from chemtrails to GMOs to all the poisons that we consume every day. That creates the body creates more and more congestion and inflammation to deal with it. So the body's natural way of dealing with it is overrun. Then you add artificially, genetically manipulated viral forms that are created in laboratories called HIV or Ebola or different things that have been added to by scientists, and artificial ways of dissemination, like what this COVID thing has been. They knew for years they were going to do this. They knew where they were going with the science. They've been practicing for this since 1917 when they introduced the so-called Spanish flu. So they have 100 years of scientific experience and a lot of money behind it to be ready to do this, because the best way to fulfill their agenda is biologically. And you don't need airplanes to drop bombs on people if you have biology. But what's really happening is it's all falling flat. It's not working. And what's trying to hold it up artificially is the media. And they're trying to get, just look at Biden's professed agenda, what he's saying. This is what we're going to do. Tracing, tracking, masks, mandatory, nationwide, social distancing, et cetera, and which will, if he got in office, collapse the economy and force people into their dictates.
Not quite 1984, but nearly Brave New World, or just worse than Brave New World. I think it's important to know that we can fight this and we can stand up against this, and I think as a global species rather than different nations that we will fight back. I'd absolutely love to have Dr. Andy Kaufman on Out of the Bag sometime. So if that can be arranged, that'd be great. So,
I'd be happy to link you to him.
Yeah.
So when you say that, what you just said, how are we best fighting it? We're best fighting it by doing the inner work, by going inside, not externalizing, projecting an enemy construct. What I just described to you, that first question you started with, have you been attacked, infiltrated, all of that? Well, the remedy for that is you could almost, it's a virtual analog to what we're talking about biologically. Is it a germ theory where something outside of us comes in and attacks, aka agents provocateurs? Or is it a terrain theory where, as I described, that we worked very assiduously and consistently to heal ourselves internally and create a structure, a society of like-minded, like-spirited, like-hearted beings who came together for the same purpose, which is to be a force and effect of change and transformation towards peace on this planet. Well, that's a terrain aspect. We created a terrain within our private society. We didn't go out and, attack the system with legal documents and this and that and the other, because I learned better. I learned after 25 years of 24/7, 365 immersion in the movement and observation and deductive reasoning that doesn't work.
No, I've actually watched 1, 2, 3, 4 of my friends in the past month being locked away in prison.
So because they're attacking a germ, they're no different than trying to vaccinate or poison the body to get these germs, out from within our healthy organism. So it is a very good analogy. It is a germ theory versus terrain. And so Andy is a spokesman now because he's got both the passion as well as obviously the background in medical as well as mental health and everything. And he's pulling together a lot of people who are waking up to that the same way that I woke up to understand the terrain theory of law and peace and all of what we talk about. And my theory has proven accurate. Yes. We've never been undermined. We've never been in any way taken down. And I've had, as I've explained, the IRS, the SEC, the FBI, and others come try to do it. And they all pretty much leave peacefully. And they say, you're right. We have no claim on you, no jurisdiction. And we use the banking system every single day, and we have no problem with it. So we're in peace, standing in peace. We're at peace with the United States, with the whole world, and our entire manifestation and mission purpose is going to peace, and it works. And so our movement, if you will, is to expand that. Now we have the Kingdom of David that has as I explained last time, a jurisdictional grounding that is irrefutable within the entire system. So we're synthesizing or integrating all of what I have brought forward in the last 30 years, the concept of status correction, private societies going to peace, and a key to understand about private societies is that a society has full and absolute authority, capacity to create its own jurisdiction, its own court, its own law form, its own treasury, aka banking or monetary system, and its own method or form of governance. And it is a decentralized, distributed model. Just like we have two camps in the world of high tech, controlled proprietary source code or open source, and the open source has been moving consciousness and awareness within the tech world, but in other areas as well, to the general paradigm shift, moving to open source and decentralization, a distributed model rather than a centralized hierarchical model, which is what the closed system and by definition, the word cabal means, secret, private, controlled, based on hierarchical structure, which is what all the secret societies, the Masons and everybody else, that's what they use. And they've used that model in the judicial system, in the monetary banking system, in the taxation, IRS, and all the other taxing authorities on the planet. It's all hierarchical. It's all a matter of initiatory rights to move to the higher levels where the benefits accrue personally, but where the mandates of what you can or cannot do also increase geometrically or exponentially. So that's the two realities we have on this planet. What is strengthening in the consciousness and the embodied awareness of humanity right now is moving towards understanding that that's an artificial reality, hierarchical, pyramidal, controlled, private, secret, and so forth, and centralized. So you can see how the holographic correspondence in all these areas, whether it's health and biology, law, social structure, and the natural place for humanity to evolve to, for me, is a distributed, decentralized structure of social, economic functioning and self-governance. Yes. We're not designed to be locked down into a global hierarchy where there's a few on the top who control everything and dictate everything. And that's where they've been trying to take it. And that's where what we're watching right now is the collapse of that artificial model.
And may it collapse very quickly, please.
It is.
Yeah.
It's already done.
Right.
You know, some of the questions that you sent me, some of your listeners, basically asked, well, how do you know this?
Yeah.
Well, again, I know it in a lot of ways, both in terms of my education, my trial and error of going through the layers of what I've done for 30 years to figure all this out, my inner guidance and knowing, and things that I am directly connected to that I have informed knowledge. A little of which I've talked about, a lot of which will be unfolded and opened up during the course of next year. But on that basis, I have absolute confidence that Biden and his cronies will not be occupying the office of the president.
Okay,
he can occupy
a lot of people are hearing.
office.
Sorry,
he can occupy his fantasy-based office of the president-elect, which is a non-existing office. But he will not occupy the office of the president. And what we then will be able to do on all fronts is begin to truly manifest a peaceful world, the cessation of hostilities, the elimination of war and violence. And I firmly know that we can do this in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And yes, I think that's why we're trying to share the information. I think that's why we're trying to join together and trust each other would be a good thing to start off with and then move forward. And we do have some questions from listeners. Maybe we should take a look at that now that we've just gone past the first hour.
Sure.
This is from Dorothea, who's been listening in to most of the shows recently. I came up with another question for Ken. I know he mentioned about previous lives, something about reincarnation, which sounds to me as a religious element, and also sometimes I tend to have an agnostic approach into things, all metaphysics. So I'm reading as it is. So basically, do we have a proof that this is really true? Can he propose a way or a resource to explore that? The same goes to the afterlife stage. Simply put, nobody came back to say to us what comes next. And on the other hand, I know that Christian and other beliefs suggest that there is heaven in order for people to adopt a passive attitude and embrace victimhood. Personally, I believe in love and connection, and without any justification, I feel I will reconnect with loved ones that passed away, and the relationship isn't just being erased. Looking forward to your next show.
Okay. Well,
wow.
Pardon?
I said wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, what I say and talk about in these areas is my perspective.
Yeah.
My perspective is based on everything I just listed off, my life experience, my very intense, consistent, and never-ending investigation and exploration into many, many, many things, sources of knowledge, wisdom, information. I've studied many of the religions, the origin of religion, and spiritual paths, belief systems, all of that. But I've studied law and the world system and the everything we've talked about for 10 and a half sessions now. So I have come up with my own synthesis, awareness, and understanding. A lot of it also has to do with the inner processes I've done my whole life. And I cross-reference everything. When somebody says, this is what it is. Andrew and I came across a man in 1998 named Robert Morningsky. Have you ever heard of him?
Not sure I have, no.
Okay. He's a Southwest American native. I think he's Hopi or Navajo or a combination, so Southwest, like in Arizona, New Mexico.
Okay.
And he's still out there. You can do a search and find his name, but we went to a conference, and he was a speaker, and then we connected with him personally for a little while. And what he talked about was that his people, and going back when he was born in the 50s, so his parents, grandparents were coming from a period of time when very, very little interaction was going on with the outside societies, in remote Arizona and so forth. And they had relationships with what they called the star people, interdimensional or beings who could move in and out of dimensions, who could be there and talk to them, communicate, whatever. And so they talked about that there was one particular craft that crashed, and his elders went and rescued one being who survived and lived with them for a long time and taught them about a lot of things. One of the key things, and the reason I'm bringing this up in relationship to the question of reincarnation, is he talked to them. Essentially, imagine we're in a controlled holographic reality, and there's a vast amount of life and life forms and intelligence and many, many things that are out there that are not necessarily what we think of as solely, the UFO phenomenon, which is by and large a PSYOPs controlled program to get us to believe in physical functioning flying saucers, most of which is controlled by, terrestrial militaries.
Yeah, I was actually told was that they're going to try and push the UFO stories and all the rest of it to make it as true as possible, because they will be using their own technology against us in the future.
Right, and create an outside enemy. Oh, yes. We're being invaded. That's what Reagan said was, well, the thing what might bring humanity together is if we had an outside invading force that we had to unify to protect ourselves from. Yes. It's the old problem, reaction, solution, or outside enemy, and patriotism.
Operation Bluebeam, I think they were.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, but the point is, there are also actually truly real multidimensional realities and extraterrestrial beings and all the rest of it. But the point is, it relates to reincarnation, is that this star being that they rescued and lived with them and communicated with them for a long time basically said, this whole concept that you die, you go to heaven, or you die and you go into the light, it's just a program. It's a holographic insert to get you to go into their reprocessing center and be recycled, which is called reincarnation.
It's something to avoid then, is it? Don't look into the light when you die.
Right, exactly. And this gets into a much more multidimensional and broader context of universal creation and so forth, and our relationship to planetary or stellar bodies.
Yeah,
these are celestial bodies.
It might be worth. Okay, I was going to say it might be worth asking the next question as well, because I think it links in. It talks about.
Yeah, I'm actually. You don't have to read that. I'll lead into that, and then we'll go into that.
Okay, that's a question for. They like to be mentioned, I think. So that's a question from Hulda. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and her question is, do we have sovereign free will? And how do you know that, and so forth. How do I know that? Again, it's my perspective based on everything I've described. But it's a deductive reasoning, basically a function of both knowing, intuition, and logic, and education, and many, many other things. It's what I've come to. If I say something that I say emphatically and authoritatively, and somebody says, well, that doesn't sound right to me, well, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Try it on. Consider asking the question, is this right? What I was taught at a very early age in my life process was, you don't ask a question necessarily to demand the answer right now. You ask a question to hold it, and you hold it sufficiently so that you draw in the pieces of the answer, because these are very large-scale questions.
Yes.
There's not just an answer like, oh, well, here's a book, read this, there's the answer. No, the answer is, because of, among other things, we're in a very fragmented, controlled reality that has fragmented our awareness and consciousness so that we can't see a whole answer. So I've learned over 50 years of my exploration to hold a question, attract in, or draw in rather than attract. I don't like the secret concept of attraction, law of attraction. That's another bullshit phrasing. But to hold it, and it pulls in, and the pieces will show up. And just because you get one piece of the answer to that question doesn't mean you have the whole question answered yet. So I've done this my whole life. Some of the questions I asked are 50 years old, and I'm still holding the question to find more of the answer. But the integrative capacity of holding fragments and see them coalesce into a whole framework or answer to a question or whatever the context is, that's a learned skill that is learned by doing it, as well as breaking down the matrix components of the fragmentation that we're generally operating within. So when somebody says something like, Robert Morningstar said, you go to the light, you're going to go into the reprocessing center. That's one part of that question. Is there sovereign free will, or is there controlled reality, matrices and stuff like that? And what's the difference between reincarnation and personally directed by your own directive principle, your own will, to incarnate onto a celestial body, whether it's planetary, stellar, galactic, or whatever, that are living consciousness creations that have manifested in a creational field in what we call physical reality. We're on a physical planet with a physical star, but when a being does that and has a proper, let's say, lawful contract with that body, the earth or the sun or the solar system, then you're in a co-creative relationship within that creational field of a conscious living being that we call Earth, and all the life systems within it. And it still gets down to what I've determined based on law, study of law, that all contract establishes jurisdiction. And we could say the Earth is a jurisdiction. We have a contract with her. And so, but there are parasites here that have co-opted or, grabbed control of this reality for their own agendas and their own purposes. And by virtue of that, we have been drawn into a contractual relationship with that construct, what we can call now the cabal, the deep state, or the Anunnaki, or, reptilian forces, all the rest of it. And so from my perspective, having delved so deep in all of this, and the law basis is, if you have entered into a contract, see, this is functional in law today on this planet. If there is a contract that you wake up to the fact that you made an error or a mistake, you can rescind your signature, which withdraws your contractual agreement, and that nullifies the contract. In fact, this just came up again last night while we were talking. One of our people here brought up the fact that, there's this earlier in the week, there was these hearings in Pennsylvania. And Jenna Ellis, who's one of the attorneys for the Trump team, was talking to the people running the hearing, which are the legislators of the body politic known as Pennsylvania. And she was telling them that that they have the power, that the governor doesn't have the power, the election committee doesn't have the power, they have the power. And then one of the legislators came back a little later and said, well, I just consulted with one of our attorneys, and the attorney said, no, you don't anymore. You gave it away to statute. In other words, you passed a statutory enactment at the legislative level of the state, right, and essentially gave it away. And Jenna just laughed and she said, yeah, but what he didn't tell you is you can rescind that. You have the power of rescission. And that's the key power we have in our own process in status correction and in equity, contractually speaking, our relationship to the matrix that we've contracted with all these contracts, from the birth certificate to the driver's license to everything in between. We have the power to correct our mistakes, say we did something in error, and rescind our signature from those contracts. And that is absolute in the law system, the legal system, and it's absolute in universal creation. Mm-hmm. And if we have the power to enter contracts, we have the power to rescind a contract. That does sort of prima facie establish a deductive fact that we have free will to enter into those agreements. Now, the other question somebody asks is, why? Well, I guess it's Hulda in the same question. Where does this come in with the Anunnaki? And they have a history of violating laws and so forth. But when you penetrate to the deepest level in your inner landscape, your inner being, and you have the capacity to do that if you do the work to unveil and peel off the layers of veiling and amnesia and so forth, you will find where you entered into a contract that gave them jurisdictional authority to do something within their defined parameter of jurisdiction. It's the same in the current legal system. It's the same in the universal system. It's the same in the, call it, deep history of this planet. And that's where revocations and rescissions of what we did that does no longer serve us, because now we've woken up to the error and mistake of what we, and I wouldn't say accidentally, but let's just say historically we entered into. And that gets into the question, was it an accident? Were we coerced? Were we
lied to? Yeah, whether we were lied to,
Yeah, whether that or not. But this is something I'm coming up against often with people when I say, well, if you look at the system as a fraudulent system, then you've disempowered yourself, because the power we have to do what I've just described, rescind, revoke, and terminate contracts, puts the ultimate power within us. It's sort of essentially the same as the germ theory versus the terrain theory. It's like, if this virus comes in against my free will, but what if the biology of the body is attempting to bring in what Dr. Andy has described as a methodology of solvency to dissolve the congestion and the inflammation and the imbalance in the body, to clear it so that we achieve more health, more balance, and all the rest of it. And so it's all interconnected. Is there an outside enemy in the form of a virus attacking us, or is that virus something that is actually a form of consciousness that we've drawn in order to start clearing a system, whether it's a biological system or a global population system? And I'm not talking about clearing by culling the herd and killing a lot of people. I'm talking about actually what's happening. Do you know that the COVID virus in the last 10 months has done more to wake up the global population, which is a form of clearing consciousness and awakening people, than anything in our modern history?
I'm sure it has. We've had nothing. This is unprecedented. And also, just before it happened, many globally were being aware and made aware by people like yourself and hopefully my show and other shows like it, and people telling the truth out there, and spreading the word. So we were already a power before they decided to try and close us down with this COVID, and instead it's awoken many that weren't before.
Right. And it's strengthened those who are already awakened,
Yes.
And it's brought more, even with all the censorship and suppression of what's out there in the media, the alternative media. People are very clever, very creative, very innovative, operating on their sovereign free will of not allowing any more the lies and the suppression. And so even with censorship, the knowledge and the awareness has broken through all that blockading and obfuscation, and it only served to expand our strength and our awareness as a global unified force.
Yes, the brainwashing is very, very powerful, though, Ken. And great people who would do great things, they doubt themselves. We doubt ourselves more than other people would I suppose support us.
Yeah. And that's true. And so there are few and far between, but those few are strong enough to not be swayed by the propaganda and the lies and everything. And that's beings like Donald Trump and his law team and myself and yourself and so forth, that, we are now in the full thrust of the onslaught of the big lie of this planet.
Yes.
This planet is known throughout all of creation as the planet of the big lie.
Yeah.
Everything is a lie, from politics to religion to biology. We've been lied to every step of the way in this generation that's currently alive, say 80 or 90 years of several generations. There's not one individual on this planet who hasn't essentially been lied to from the day they were born.
Yeah. You do see what people are facing, though. In this country, we've got a Dr. O'Leary who's going on live TV, and there's the RTE bumchum, he goes on live TV and tells everyone how exciting it is that we will all have a vaccine available in the new year, and that how stupid we would be not to take it, and all the rest of it. And then he adds to that, and by the way, we're going to make it a condition. We're going to make it a condition: if you don't have the vaccine, you can't travel, you can't work, you can't earn, you can't, etc., etc., go to school, go to university, etc.
Yeah, well, it's going to take a lot of, it's unfortunate because a lot of people are going to believe that, and they're going to accept that. There's a real question what is in these vaccines that are now coming out. A lot of people have, decried the fact that, Trump's promoting the vaccine. But, I see it in context and perspective that if he had just come out against it, he would have
he would have had a lot of trouble. He would have had a lot of trouble, definitely.
Yeah. So, but see, they also timed the trajectory. So everything he said is, yes, I'm for vaccines, but I'm also for therapeutics and so on and so forth. And no, I will not make the vaccine mandatory. Well, if Biden got into the office, I will guarantee you they would make it mandatory.
Yeah.
But then, see, as the states go, so goes the world. So that's why this election and what's going on right now in the next 30 to 45 days is literally critical for the world and literally this whole universe.
It is, sadly, because it is a global cabal, and it's not just American. It's United Nations, it's European, it's all sorts, and these people are making decisions on behalf of the world.
Right.
And they've got their agenda, and it certainly is to enslave, empower, and use us for material benefit.
Right. but it's even more than just material benefit because, see, one of the aspects of, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about this in our conversations, but if not, I'll say it now. If I have, well, worth repeating.
Absolutely.
This planet is extremely unique in its creational capacity of creating life, life forms. The myriad expression of life on this planet is literally unprecedented from again, my inner knowing, my deductive reasoning, if you will. And the human biology, the human genetics is extremely unique as well. And one of the things this cabal, because it's not just a planetary cabal, it's a galactic universal. We're in a creation called a universe with many galaxies, many stars and solar systems and planetary systems and so forth, that we're talking about a universal war of who is going to control life in this universe. And our DNA, the human biology, the human system that they want so much to absolutely control, which is ultimately what the vaccine and the suppression of free will is about. And they want to control the technology of the biological and spiritual capacity of the human genetics, human form. And it has been harvested and taken to vast places around the universe to repopulate, Borg, hive mind, zombie collectives that are controlled for the, let's just call them the anti-life, violence, martial reality. And so getting control of the human population on this planet is not just an individual issue, not a national, not a global, it's a universal issue. And we're literally at the the showdown at the OK Corral. This is it.
Well, I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted, Ken, because really, if you just break it all down, a people of a nation, doesn't matter what nation, puts into power a government who hopefully will look after them. That's what they want.
Right.
None of those governments should interfere in anyone else's politics or anyone else's government or anyone else's country. But this is what's been happening. Britain, especially. I mean, we wouldn't have America as it stands today without British warring and British empiring. We wouldn't have it. It wouldn't exist. Red, white and blue, well, we know where that comes from. Do you know? Mm-hmm. So that's what's been going on. It's been war and larger countries going in and controlling other countries. I live in a country where we've still got 6 counties of our beautiful little island owned. Well, we're all owned by them, really, but owned by the British Empire, and it's just sickening that they interfered with what could be a beautiful, wonderful, well-run country. And I think that's the same globally. What do you think? You still there, Ken? Hello, hello? Hello, Ken, you still there? Oh, looks like we've got a bit of trouble. Ken, are you still there? Hello? Okay, I'm not having any luck with Ken. We are connected still. There seems to be nothing wrong with his Skype. I don't quite understand. Okay.
Hello?
Oh. Now I just... And welcome back to Out of the Bag, and that was a terrible technical difficulty. I do apologise. Ken Scott, are you back with me?
Yes, I am. Okay.
Oh, brilliant. I thought you were going to answer then.
Yeah, so I'll just repeat what I said last couple of minutes in case you didn't catch it. Okay. That I'm absolutely certain that Trump will stay in office, that Biden will not take the office of the president. The office of the president in the United States is absolutely key and critical for everything we're talking about in terms of the ripple effect or the domino effect to all these countries. They're all going full bore on the basis of thinking they'll be able to power it through to take control of the office of the president, and by so doing, then do their, World Economic Forum, Great Reset, Bill Gates of Hell vaccine program, and all the rest of it. And but we can speak of it on the what if he did take office, what it would look like. But that's like talking about a future production of the Twilight Zone. What's the worst scenario? Because it would be a dystopian Orwellian reality. But it's not going to happen. We've woken up collectively sufficiently. We will not allow it. And there are many things in place that we will talk about more, that I'll be able to talk about more expanded over the next few months of our monthly sessions. And I guarantee what will look like at the end of the first quarter of next year will be a whole lot different and a whole lot clearer and better than anybody in their negative expectation might be thinking, that we're going into doom and gloom. We're not. No. And this is a monumental event on a universal level, because the DNA harvesting that's taken place of the human biology for millions of years off of this planet, and has been spread and converted into the negative expression through war and violence, domination and control, is able to be transformed by what we do in these bodies, in our unified field on this planet, and moving towards the reality that we are now beginning to manifest, a true planet of peace and harmony and vibrancy in life.
Brilliant.
That's my intention, and nothing's going to stop me from directing my will and my capacity to create it to look anywhere else other than that. And that's what I recommend everybody do.
Yeah. And we have so much negative thrown at us constantly. So we need to make a conscious decision, a conscious effort to think positively, to share love out to the universe, to spread that will and that energy. We need to actually consciously decide to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'll be dragged into the mire of the negativity all the time.
Right. Well, we are what we focus on. We create. We exist in the reality that we direct our creational capacity into. And the media and the binary code, the polarity, the enemy construct, everything I talk about, and we've talked about in all these calls, is the thrust towards resting our consciousness to continue to focus on that endless loop of recycling. That's where reincarnation comes in. We're recycled, because we are linked to source. Any being on this planet, and I say being, not human being, because in law, a human being is considered a monster who cannot inherit land. And if you can't inherit land, you have no standing on the land. You have no direct feet the soil relationship with the earth. This is where we need to get to. Metaphorically, energetically, and legally, lawfully, and in full term. And so it's all been about redirecting us to be in these endless cycles of reincarnation, energy harvesting, creational capacity, misdirection towards a dystopian reality of, eternal enslavement. But we have the power, like I've said in this call, the power to rescind our signature, to revoke powers of attorney that we've given by applying a signature to a document or a contract, and thereby, with rescission and revocation, to terminate that contract. Reality is continually regenerating itself constantly. So we can regenerate our healthy living body's well-being. We can regenerate a living planetary body that is healthy and in dynamic equilibrium with life, all those things. But we have to break the cycles, which is what we are actually successfully doing and have been during our lifetimes.
Right. And hopefully long may it continue, so that it makes it easier for future generations.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Ken.
Well, exactly. That's what we created Panterra as a multi-generation legacy trust. And by the nature of a trust, there are beneficiaries. And who are the beneficiaries of the legacy trust that each of us can create individually, collectively, in a society or in the grand society of a global unified field? The beneficiaries are the future generations.
Yes.
So just like a parent creates a trust for his children, they're the beneficiaries. We're creating a trust of life itself. We're retaking control of our lives and the life force on this planet, and we're creating it in a way that protects and preserves it for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple of other questions maybe before we finish, or did you want to talk about something before?
Well, I just want to say, going back to Dorothea's question, where she says that, talking about, she writes, I know he mentioned previous life something about reincarnation, which sounds to me as a religious element.
Yes.
She tends to have an agnostic approach into things, all metaphysics. Well, the word agnostic means the contrary of knowledge. Gnosis in the Greek means knowledge. Agnosis or agnostic means not having knowledge. So religion is a hijacking of our capacity to know something, to integrate it, to have awareness with it, and by integrating it within our being and bringing more and more online the extraordinary technology of the biological form, integrated with our higher principle, our multidimensional capacity, when we know it at that level, then we can direct it and direct creation with it. So I understand what she means about agnostic, basically meaning non-religious or non-deification, non-God concept, which we talked about before, and I agree with all that. I'm not into deification or anthropomorphism of creating a father godlike concept, but it's not religion to look at, as I've described in this call, the inner knowing and everything else I've talked about that provides the ability to have an awareness that reincarnation is like the bondage of religion. Religion means to bond again. Bonding what? Binding what? The mind. The directive principle gets broken down to where we just start creating the hive mind collective program that humanity has been under for thousands and millions of years. So breaking the binding nature of religion, belief systems, false hijacking realities, does not mean that, what I've talked about, that reincarnation exists, is in any way my saying, describing something that's a religious element as she describes it. But I've gone into all of that, studied it extensively, law, religion, and the rest of it, to see where the mirroring is. It's the obverse of reality. I've used the phrase often, where they say for you to go, don't go. Where do they say to go? Well, believe the law of the priests, go to the temples and churches, bow down to their deification of an AI generated reality. That's where they say you go. If you do that, you'll earn your way into heaven, which she addresses. Heaven and hell and earth in between is just a false construct. The definition and law of the word hell is the chamber under the table of the exchequer or the arch treasurer of the empire, where the king keeps his debtors. We're all in hell already because we're in debt. We're in hell. So they posit that there's a heaven, and if you keep paying your taxes, following the rules, obeying the priest, and everything else, you will earn your way to heaven. But it doesn't work that way, because when you die in debt, you die in karmic retribution, where they reattach you when you're out of body, and you have to pay off the debt. And how do you do that? Well, we'll send you back and see if you can earn your way out this time. We've been doing it for thousands of lifetimes, thousands of cycles, and all we have to do is say, stop.
Yeah.
I no longer agreed to this contract. It was not fraudulent, but I have determined it doesn't serve me in this life and for all of my lives, past, present, and future. I rescind, revoke, and terminate.
So what you're saying is that we can rescind contracts that we are unaware that we've ever been part of, but have been
Yeah.
controlling us for years. Can we
Yeah.
just rescind them with the knowledge that they exist? Or
Yeah, sure. You
yeah,
don't have to enumerate each one. If it's important for your consciousness to become aware of a specific one,
yeah,
I'm talking in spiritual, metaphysical terms, then your life will rearrange itself so you get the awareness and
yes,
specificity
yes,
of that particular one. So, for example, if you believed wholeheartedly and with all your spirit and being, you know, 6 centuries ago in Middle Europe, that you had to be abject denial of anything in the physical world, celibacy, vow of poverty, absolute, abnegation of your own personal benefits or desires, and you took on a vow of poverty, a vow of celibacy, or anything like that. Well, that is a binding contract that you made with yourself or with some concept called a God above you.
yeah,
And that doesn't leave your being when you drop that body. So a lot of people are struggling with issues of poverty. Did you ever consider the possibility that you took a vow of poverty and it's still resonating in your being? Well, if you do something as simple as say, I rescind my signature, my unique signature frequency on any vows, contracts, agreements, or similar that I ever took in any life on this planet or any other planet in any universe, any alternate reality, alternate universe, et cetera, cover all bases. I rescind it if it no longer serves my highest and best purpose in this life and in all future lives I may have. Something like that. I revoke every power of attorney I ever gave to an outside authority that gave them control over me by giving them power of attorney by virtue of those vows, contracts, agreements, and so forth. And thereby I terminate all contracts that do not serve me at this time.
brilliant.
For some people, they'll say, well, I'm not going to rescind my vow that I made to my church or my belief system. Well, that's fine. That's your choice.
Yeah,
But if you start seeing that may be binding in a controlled religious construct that does not, by rescinding and removing yourself from that, does not take away, but actually adds to and expands your relationship with whatever you want to call it, God, source, or whatever, then consider that. Just know that every religion on this planet is a lie. It has hijacked everything that is substantive in our own being, and it has created a mirroring image of it so that we think it's what is correct, but is actually got hooks and control mechanisms behind it.
yeah, it's incredible. I mean, when I was little, I just thought that religion. Well, I was an altar boy in a Catholic church, a very large Irish community, but in England. I just thought that it was a complete and utter farce, and that I just thought, oh my God, it's a massive distraction. And these people who could be going out and doing good in their world instead are praying for someone else to do it. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah, because it's not understandable from a logical perspective.
Yeah, I suppose. Incredible, incredible. So I hope that's answered Dorothea's question. It certainly covered it very well, and thank you for that, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question about the Fall of the Cabal, the sequel, the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you want to answer that.
Well, all I can say, whoever sent that in just said, have I watched it? Yes, I have. It's called The Fall of the Cabal, and yeah, I think it's very good. So anything else I can say about that.
Okay, well, no, not really. But Andrew is the guy's name, and
Yeah.
he asked that question. But he also asked, "Could you please ask Ken this question?" Hi, Ken. For several last months, the government all over the world are breaking the law, all kinds of even constitutional ones. New World Order is going to establish the new draconian laws. So what is your message to your followers? Will it be possible to get freedom from present oppression?
Okay.
You've been saying
First
that
of
it
all,
is possible.
I don't have followers. Second of all, people do follow what I put out there, and I do welcome that. But everything I'm doing is not for followers. It's for people to wake up to their own sovereign authority and take control by increasing the knowledge, everything we talk about, and always questioning, holding the question. Do not get fixated on something and religify it because somebody is out there promoting some form or another of, especially in the legal and the law arena. There's just so much disinformation out there of good intended people, but as the saying goes, the path to hell is paved by good intentions, but they don't know what they're doing. They're presenting partial pieces, and they're leading people astray. And some, unfortunately, are going to prison. Like you mentioned earlier, you got 4 friends who've been taken away recently. I know dozens and hundreds of people, and all over the world we hear it every day. It gets down to the fundamental of everything we talk about, which is law, jurisdiction, contract, and binding agreements. You have to understand, let's go through the basics. The United States was supposedly the land of the free and the home of the brave. The place where sovereignty was vested in in the people. Whereas prior to that, there was only one sovereign, which was the crown sovereign. Where did he get a crown, or she? From the Pope. Where did he get it? From the sun. He took the corona of the sun and coronated it on the head of a king or queen, and that king or queen became a crown sovereign. And then that same Pope, which is a succession of different men wearing the same robes.
Dress.
So, I like to refer to them as the Roman transvestites. They like to dress up as women and put strange-looking things on their head, especially this thing that looks like a fish head with 3 crowns on it, the triple crown that began with the promulgation of something called a papal bull, which everybody, I'm sure, knows of that, maybe not all the detail, but in 1302, the Unum Sanctum, which was followed in the next 200 to 300 years with more papal bulls that constitute something known as the doctrine of discovery. You have to look at the entire continuum of history to understand the answer to this question and where the solution is. So you have that doctrine of discovery, the coronation, which is taking the esoterics of the sun god and Amun-Ra and all the Egyptian stuff and putting the corona, which is why they have a coronavirus going on, by the way.
Yeah, clever, isn't it?
Which somebody pointed out on a little video I saw recently. If you take the letters C as the 3rd letter and O as the 15th letter and so forth, you add up the numbers, 1 through 26 for the English alphabet. You add up the numbers corresponding to the word corona, you add them up and they become 66. And there are 6 letters in corona. You have the 666, which is, there's a whole other conversation about what that number is. It's not what people think in the negative entirely, but that's another conversation we'll do next time. But the point is, it all is interconnected. It's all holographic, microcosm, macrocosm.
Yes.
The whole reflects the part reflects the whole. And that's why when we break down law and the bondage to religion and money, we can see the greater universal construct and many of the things we've talked about in this conversation. But back to the basics, you have this whole thing. The Pope says, I am the stand-in for Christ, the vicar of Christ, because of the
throne of Peter in the apostolic succession, so I can speak infallibly as if I am God. It's all about creating a singular apex male on a throne to say, I'm God.
Yeah.
And I can promulgate through my courts and my ecclesiastical societies and all the rest of it, the codes and the statutes and the law of the priest that I have. And not all priests are wearing black robes. There's priests of the medical reality, priests of the judicial, priests of the taxation, priests of the education. They're all set up as priesthoods, the law of the priest, right, that becomes binding on the flesh of those who have contracted to agree to be under that authority. So the doctrine of discovery, the coronation of a crowned sovereign, et cetera, set up this whole world system, which is a world system based on Roman military conquest, period.
Yeah.
And when you're under Roman military conquest, you're under admiralty law, you're under civil codes, you're under bankruptcy. And so then you have this point in history that, oh, here's the thing that's different. The United States of America, the perpetual union, the republic. But from the minute that republic started, it was inverted upside down and essentially put into bankruptcy over a period of 200 years. And then all the nations and all the sovereign countries were converted to nations, became bankrupt nation states as corporations under the United States Corporation, and then under the United Nations as an aggregate whole body. And we're all born into that. Yeah. You know, the basis, the root of the word nation is natio, which basically means nativity, to be born into something jurisdictionally, contractually. You become a part of a nation state. When those nation states were converted to corporations, they were put into bankruptcy. They were put into Roman civil law. Now you have a global system of controlling the flesh of all humanity. And in the Unum Sanctum in 1302 and onward, the papacy said, we own all flesh, we own all souls, and we own all land. And hence, they want to say they own the land of this earth. That means they own the earth, and we own the flesh, which means they own the DNA. And then when the soul leaves the flesh, we harvest that. We own that too. So the United States did have a unique aspect, which was that sovereignty was vested in the free white males holding land as electors of representation. But then that was all flipped and turned into corporate codes and statutes. So the reason why what's happening right now is so critical here is because if you listen to, the most famous speech of Trump, if you listen to the X-22 report on Wednesday, and it's not on YouTube anymore. If you go to x22report.com, you will find it. Find the Wednesday B episode. And at the end, he plays that speech that Trump did in 2016. And he basically fundamentally said, this is what I'm doing. I'm here to stop all this and return the power to the people. And in our world, power means law. Law means standing. Standing means your barefoot toes and soles of your feet on the dirt, metaphorically, legally, and physically. Get grounded. Go out and walk in the sand in the dirt, and do the steps to rescind the overlay and remove it. So what is happening right now is about to shift the power back to the people, first in the United States, but because of that, to remove the overlay of all national bankrupt corporations, because the bankruptcy on the global scale was for one purpose, which was to collateralize and attach the flesh of the living beings who still were connected to source and creation, for them to continually, eternally be bonded into enslavement through contractual debt, to keep recreating our prison and creating their paradise for them to be physical gods overlording the true creators. We are the true creators. We don't need them. We don't need centralized government, and we don't need centralized monetary systems. There are things coming that will enable us to reinstitute a universal template of distributed or decentralized self-governance and the rest of it, so we can actually remove the overlay and build a true paradise on this planet.
Well, that's what we want, Ken. We do want that. Do you know we've actually ran out of time? The technical difficulties didn't annoy us too much because I've pinned the two together to get a full 2 hours, Ken.
Okay.
There is a question outstanding that we'll save for next time. So, AD, we will ask your question next time, maybe. I just want to say, Ken, the next show you do is the 12th. So that'll be a year of doing shows of 2 hours per 2 hours per show, and I have had people thanking you so much for doing that, and I've been lucky they've been thanking me for facilitating it too. So I'm really thrilled with how it's going. How do you think it's going, and is there stuff that we haven't really grasped yet?
Well, I think it's going fabulous. I think it fits right in with how I described how am I doing when you first asked 2 hours ago.
Good.
It increases my joy factor, and being able to be here with everybody who listens, to express all this, to actually put it out there for people to take in, to contemplate, and to engage the work that we're here to do, which is everything we've just described. Yeah. So I appreciate everybody for being here, and all who've sent in questions or gratitude and so forth. We'll
be here in the new year, Ken, so we will.
Yeah, and I'll put in a little commercial plug. Speaking of gratitude,
go for it.
How long ago was it? I don't know. I know when it was. Yeah, it was 20 years ago. The election 20 years ago, when Bush and Gore went into their thing. We were at a Thanksgiving, and we had to present something on the theme of gratitude. So I quickly composed in my head a few stanzas or verses of a rap song that is now known as Gratitude. If you go onto Gemstone University YouTube website and you look for Gratitude, you will see it. So that's my one-hit wonder as a soon-to-never-be famous world rap star. But that's what it's about.
Brilliant.
Our relationship to the universe is gratitude. So I do a full performance of my rap song.
Well, maybe the next time you're on, you could do a full live performance of it.
Well, I'll have to practice. We'll see. But how do I feel? It's great. We're going to start the new year with a tremendous impulse to expand all of this and actually make it real in manifestation. And that's what's most important, is actually bringing it to real reality. Manifestation, acts and deeds and work in the world, because we have a big job to do. We have 4 or more billion people who do not have the luxury of a life of respect and integrity with the basics. Indeed. What Panterra is here to do is to be part of the solution, to actually make sure everybody on the planet has that. That's a simple statement with a profoundly impactful result when we actually achieve it. And when we achieve that, then we will have heaven on earth.
Yes, we'll have celebrations then, surely. I just want to say thank you so much, Ken, for coming on Out of the Bag all these months, and may it long continue. I do want to do a poem for you, but I will leave that till either next time or the time after that, when we've got time, because there is one that sticks out that I thought you might like to hear. But please, everyone, check out www.panterrapca.org, gemstoneuniversity.org, and also on YouTube, Gemstone University on YouTube. Check it out. There's so much brilliant information, and hopefully many more people will people feel that they would like to remove the shackles of this indoctrinated program that we seem to be living under. And I just want to thank Ken for helping us to do that. And I just wish we were mainstream media. I really do, so that we could.
We will be soon. We will be it. So I will leave you with the first few lines of my rap song.
Oh, okay.
Goes like this. Goes like this. Hey, dude, gratitude. Now that's the food to change your mood. So give thanks, because that's the kind of wealth you can't find in the banks. And remember, if you ain't having fun, it's never, ever, ever the other one. So do what I say, boy. It's never your mother, son. Attitude. That's what I'm talking about. Makes you want to scream, makes you want to shout. And whether you got tanks coming up your drive or somebody else yanks your nose, well, everybody knows that's the way it goes. So just do what I say. And whether you're at work or whether you're at play, get some latitude to your attitude and put some amplitude to your gratitude. And don't be rude and don't be crude. Just get yourself some gratitude.
Brilliant. A boola bus, as they say here in Ireland. A round of applause. Ken Scott, thank you so much for coming back on Out of the Bag.
Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.